But the last one that we have is probably not a Valentine's Day. It's probably not even a family pick because it's a little bit more melodramatic than I expected it to be. But it was, I think, a winner out of the U.S. dramatic competition at Sundance because I think Nico Parker ended up snatching an award for performance in the movie Suncoast.
Nice.
Was she worthy of it, Zach?
I mean, I thought she was pretty convincing. I don't know if it's my choice personally for like the best performance out of all the movies at Sundance, but I thought she was good. And she was really good, and she really sells this story that puts a heavy emotional burden on its actors. Yeah. I thought Suncoast was pretty good. I thought this was a pretty like sweet and empathetic but real perspective on going through this kind of difficult situation where you have a family member that's under intense medical care, and it's about it's a semi-autobiographical tale of the writer-director's own upbringing with a brother who was put into hospice care, and very coincidentally and tangentially related to the story, in the same facility where Terry Schiavo was. For those of you who are listening who are younger than me, which is the vast majority of you, Terry Schiavo was a woman around whom there was like a national media story about her husband had been taking care of her, although she, I believe, was brain dead but still alive, and he had chosen to remove her feeding tube in order to end her end of care life. But her parents had protested that and wanted to keep her alive. It turned into this big pro-life versus end of life care story. And yeah, I mean, it's just adds this sort of like fascinating real world context to the background of this story that is otherwise not really about that story, which I thought was kind of interesting in centering this in a time and place. That's one thing that I think the film does well, is it really does feel of a time and place, the way that these high school parties are, the elements of preparing for oncoming tropical storms. Like, it really does feel like ripped from her memoirs or her diaries or whatever. I don't know if it's like the deepest or most unique perspective being shown in the story, but I thought it was effective, at least.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good cross of being one of those movies we talk about where it's like, this seems to have a really big budget to be in the U.S. dramatic competition for first timers at Sundance.
You got
but
Laura
it has
Linney and Woody Harrelson.
Right. The cast is stacked. It was already picked up by who would it technically be? If it's on Hulu, it's
I thought it was Focus Features, or maybe it's Searchlight.
Focus too, but it's on Hulu, so it's obviously a big name. But it's a good mix of it being like a high production from a studio and then something that would have that Sundance indie feel to it. I thought Nico Parker was good. I thought, like you were mentioning, the relationship between her and her classmates, her peers, the banter that they had back and forth, I thought that was fresh. There's a lot of times where you feel it go into a very stale place or where it needs it to go, and I like that the movie didn't do that. There are moments where another movie would have done something stereotypical because it needed the story to go that way, and the friends would just be like, oh, well, that's something that happened. Because that is more how teenagers would be, especially how you were mentioning in this town. I don't feel like a storm happened because they needed it for the plot. Things happened exactly how she recalled it while she was living there.
Exactly.
It was interesting that you had mentioned that the story and the connection there, because I have two things. One, it reminds me of, do you remember the movie Me Before You?
I don't off the top of my head. I will give it a quick
Finnick
Google.
from Hunger Games.
Right,
had like MS,
yes.
And he's like, I want to, pass. And it was, what's her name from Game of Thrones, who had to make the decision for him.
Emilia Clarke.
That movie got boycotted, obviously. And that was when that story really came up as well, because they felt that was kind of pushing, the idea of whether people are for that or against that. What would it be considered? Assisted.
Yes.
I'll just leave it at that. The assisted take on that. But the second thing would be is, do you feel that this is a better version of a critique that May December has gotten?
Well, okay, so if we're talking about the idea of basing something on reality but changing some details and like the exploitative nature of Hollywood using the stories of real people, I think this is different in the sense that, A, this is coming from the perspective of a person who went through this, right? Like it's not the writer-director Laura Chin making up what it would be like to be in Terry Schiavo's family. It's their experience having a tangential connection to a real world story. It's very passingly commenting on the real world story. So I feel like it steers clear of those types of ethical concerns. Not that I had those concerns particularly for May December, but it, it is able to. But like it is able to, comment on it in a way without it feeling like it's exploiting that story. There's enough of a personal connection there where they have some similarities that are impossible to deny.
For sure. You had mentioned Laura Linney as having that double feature of moms who are just yelling and yelling and yelling, and I think Laura Linney is way too talented to be doing the same yell she's been doing since I feel like the beginning of Ozark and several other movies that we've been seeing her in. I don't know, man. I just feel like we can get more interesting roles out of her at this point in time.
She's a fantastic actress and just frequently overlooked in terms of like our best actors of her generation. Yeah. And it just kind of gets put in a lot of these thankless parts recently, feels like.
Yeah. But she was still pretty good in this movie.
Yeah, no, she's excellent. It's just we know she can do more, and at least, and to Ozark's credit, they find some more to do with her as the series goes along.
As the series goes on, that's what I'm saying. She is worthy of interesting roles, not just the standard dramatic. I'm the mom who's going to yell at you, and I will hit this note. That's easy. That's recess time for her. So I'm curious to see what more they do for her. I think Nico Parker's going up there as well. Obviously, daughter of Dandaway Newton, which is why she looks so much like Dandaway, and why it worked perfectly. I think in. I know she was in Dumbo. I don't think her mom was in, but in Reminiscence, they were able to play off that. So I'm rooting for Nico Parker. I hope she's got a bright future for her. And I think Woody Harrelson might be around for a minute, too.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid actor. By the way, it was Searchlight that
released
it.
Okay, yeah. So makes sense.